My real responsibility is to coach their hearts, is to coach their habits for long beyond when I'm going to be with them.
Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses, and each week I talk with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets. Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas we all can apply to our own lives, personally and professionally. Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people. Let's go. Hi, friends. This week, my guest is UCLA women's basketball head coach, Cori Close. When Cori's collegiate basketball playing career ended in 1993, she never envisioned going straight into college coaching. But in 1994, she was offered a position on UCLA's coaching staff and hasn't looked back since. At the time, the position was called Restricted Earnings Coach. It was a full-time position designed to give programs an opportunity to take a chance on someone with leadership potential. And as the name indicates, it came with some restrictions. In the role, Cori could be paid no more than $16,000, and she couldn't do any recruiting off campus. But that foot in the door for Cori has since turned into something extraordinary. After those first 2 seasons at UCLA, Cori went on to serve 6 seasons as an associate head coach and assistant at her alma mater, UC Santa Barbara, and then 7 seasons as associate head coach at Florida State, where she cemented her status as one of the top young minds in college basketball. In 2011, Cori returned to UCLA as head coach and has led the program to a remarkable .672 winning percentage during her tenure as head coach. In the 2023-2024 campaign, Cori led the team to its second consecutive 27-win season. The team reached its highest ranking in program history, sitting at number 2 in the AP Top 25 women's basketball poll for 9 weeks. But for Cori, making a positive impact on the basketball court is just a piece of the equation. Cori cares deeply about coaching her players for life, and as she says, coaching their hearts and habits to impact them long beyond their time with her at UCLA. In our conversation, Cori shared timeless career and life lessons that apply far beyond basketball. You'll hear ideas on adjusting to new leadership roles, how to turn challenges into personal growth, what Cori learned being mentored by coaching icon John Wooden, and so much more. This episode is raw, vulnerable, and I hope it's a building block that can help all of us reach our full potential while we lift others up along the way. I hope you take away as much from this conversation as I have. So let's pull the tarp and get straight to Cori Close. Coach, where I want to begin, I want to go way back a bit. You began your coaching career on the UCLA coaching staff in 1994, following a great playing career at UC Santa Barbara. I'm curious, Coach, did you always know that you wanted to get into coaching after your playing days were over?
I thought I would do any high school coaching possibly, but I really never dreamed that I'd go right into college coaching. You know, at that time, they had a position called restricted earnings. So you were a full-time coach, but you could only get paid $16,000. And the only other thing you couldn't do was go out and recruit. So I could only on-campus recruit. And I got that. So what it allowed is young people like me to sort of have them take a chance on us. And so I was the restricted earnings coach at UCLA on the women's side, and Steve Lavin was the restricted earnings coach on the men's side. And he's actually the one that eventually brought me to meet Coach Wooden for the first time. And then I had the opportunity to be mentored by him for 15 years. So it was very fortuitous, but I really didn't anticipate getting into college coaching, which is interesting. I actually was a better soccer player out of high school than I was basketball, but they didn't have very many scholarships. And so I knew I needed to get a scholarship. I love basketball as well, but I sort of stumbled into doing that in college just so I could get my education paid for. And I thought I would either do like sports ministry or be a high school coach. And here I am 31 years later, college coaching being the only thing I've ever done.
Well, Coach, I feel like there's so much there that I want to unpack, and I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, but you just kind of led me to it right there. You talked about being mentored by Coach Wooden for 15 years. And I'm sure people have asked you this question 1,000 times. Like, is there, of all the wisdom that he must have shared through that relationship, is there one thing in particular that you took away from that relationship?
It really wasn't anything that he shared. It was the consistency in which he lived. He used to say the best teachers, they don't teach the message verbally, they live the message. And so that the best messages are caught, not taught. And he really lived that. And so every time I was around him, I just was blown away by his example. And, he just was an amazing teacher, philosopher, poet, and as well, pretty darn good basketball coach too. But I think the biggest thing, honestly, is the consistency in which he lived out his principles impacted me every time I was with him.
That is powerful. So well said. That idea of leading by example, that phrase you used there, caught, not taught, right, is something I think that doesn't just apply to basketball. It can apply to anything that we're doing. It's such an important message. I'm so glad you shared it. Very, very well said. So I'm curious. So after UCLA, you get the opportunity at your alma mater, UC Santa Barbara. You're there for 6 seasons, some as an assistant, some as an associate head coach. Then you go on to Florida State, where you're the associate head coach for 7 seasons. I'm curious. And then you come back to UCLA, get your first head coaching job. What do you remember most about the transition between the associate head coach role and that first time head coach job?
Everybody says there's just such a big difference between those 18 inches from one seat to another, and it's hard to believe. And I thought I worked for some of the most empowering, amazing bosses that let me make a lot of mistakes, fail and move forward. And Sue Semrau, Mark French, Kathy Olivier. So I was an assistant for 18 years. And I thought, okay, I think I'm pretty ready for this. No, I just think you shoulder everything differently. Everything is your fault. Everything is, I would say that it's hard to even take the credit for anything, but you feel the failures of everything. And I think that learning how to balance that and learning how to appropriately take that on was a hard transition for me, quite frankly. I was so blessed that UCLA took a chance on me and gave me that opportunity. But I quickly figured out that it felt different to be responsible for it all. And so, and I think it's honestly, I've been doing it now, finished 13 seasons, going into my 14th, and I'm still learning. I'm still trying to learn to balance all of that. But you just feel a different level of depth of responsibility.
What were some of the things that you would do if you started to feel a little bit of that unease kind of creeping into your mind in terms, what would you do in those situations?
Well, and just to really just cut to the vulnerability of it, I had a trauma that took place after I think it was my first season, and I experienced some PTSD that really rocked me. And the reality of that, though, in the moment, it was really, really hard, but it gave me some tools about, simple things like box breathing and talking out loud when I felt those things coming up, speaking truth to the lies I was tempted to believe or the stress I was tempted to internalize. And, John Gordon has a saying that he says, just because you have a particular thought doesn't mean you need to believe it. And so I would literally say out loud, like, that's not true. I'm okay. I'm safe. Or I would breathe 15 times. And on the way out, I would say out loud, relax, you're okay. And I know that sounds sort of kooky, but it actually, even to this day, some of the tools I was forced to learn in that journey of working through my own PTSD has really made me a better leader, because I'm able to recognize, okay, I know I'm feeling this. I can respond to it. I don't have to react to it. I have more tools in my toolbox to navigate those things. But I do think it's something you just have to really work at. And there's a lot of stress in our world. And I love our team. It's not really the public scrutiny that gets to me. It's just that I don't ever want to let my players and my staff down. And so learning how to figure out what is my responsibility and what is not. I actually learned a lot of that through having to wrestle through my own journey with anxiety and PTSD.
And Coach, I'm so glad you shared that and you used the word kooky. It's not kooky. I mean, that is important and powerful stuff. And I just can't stop thinking about that comment you made a few minutes ago about that lesson you learned from Coach Wooden about caught, not taught. And I have to believe that when you're coaching your players and you're leading your players, not only on the floor, but in life in general, them seeing that you've actually put this type of stuff into practice in your own life is kind of contributes to that caught, not taught, right? You're living that, how important that is.
Yeah, I really do hope so. And I think it does give me, I think if I'm being honest, before I really wrestled with that, I probably was a little judgmental because I didn't understand. And it allows me to be more empathetic to something that a lot of our players are dealing with these days. And just the stresses that come into play and handling a very high profile sport and those kinds of things. So I really do it imperfectly. But I think one of the things that I really learned also from Coach Wooden was my real responsibility is to coach their hearts, is to coach their habits for long beyond when I'm going to be with them. He never cared about his championships. They were always a byproduct of coaching their hearts well. And so for me, as I started to learn how to process some of the stress, I just am like, you know what? My biggest calling is not to their jump shots. My biggest calling is not to cutting down nets. It doesn't make me any less driven or motivated to accomplish those things, but it really redefines what my true purpose is. And I think as I live that out really well, the championships will take care of themselves. And so, that allows you to do that. So, I mean, I think that I had to redefine what my real calling was, but, hopefully, I think the other thing that I've done really well, I've done a lot of things poorly, but I've done really well, is I've hired amazing people around me. And I hired staff members that are smarter than me, that invest well, that put the mission above themselves. And I think about their investment in our players' lives, and they're just covering for me. I think if you really want to be successful in life and you want to overcome hard things, make sure your circle is equipping you to do so. And I've been really lucky to have that.
Coach, I'm curious. I've heard you tell a story about, I think it was relatively early in your time at UCLA as head coach. An alumni from the men's basketball team came into your office and talked about the power of the program to create impact beyond basketball. And was that, I mean, obviously you had all the time, the relationship with John Wooden, Coach Wooden, and earlier, but was that a defining moment for you in really understanding the power of this role?
Yeah, I think I was wrestling. It was my fourth day on the job, and I know exactly what you're referring to. And I remember thinking I'm wrestling to bring clarity to our mission and our vision and how we were going to sell this, but also how we were going to live it and how we were going to build the foundation. I hadn't hired a staff or anything. You're just trying to keep your head above water. And this guy walks in, his name is John Valley, and he played for Coach Wooden, but I had never met him. And they said, oh, he's the dribble for the cure guy. We're involved in his community service venture. And so he comes in, he goes, hey, Coach, welcome back to the family. And he sits down across from me and he launches in. He says, I've been married 38 years because of what Coach Wooden taught me. I've started 3 successful businesses because of what Coach Wooden taught me. I survived and battled cancer 3 times and conquered it because of the way Coach Wooden gave me strength and taught me how to be strong. And then he really got me. And he said, I survived the death of my 12-year-old daughter, Erin, because of the way Coach Wooden loved me. And then he's like, welcome back to the family. I'll see you at Dribble for the Cure. And he was out the door. It was like a 7-minute conversation. It was just crazy. So I run over to my computer and I look him up. And he doesn't even mention that he was the starting guard on 2 of Coach Wooden's national championship teams and that he played 7 years in the NBA because it paled in comparison to the man he became. And sort of what I referenced earlier, when you put other things like character, habits, investment in their hearts, unconditional love ahead of X's and O's and wins and losses, it doesn't take away your opportunity to pursue those things at the highest levels. It doesn't make you less competitive. It actually makes you more. But what that story did for me was, okay, that's it. How many John Valley stories can we create at UCLA? How many times can we have someone come back in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years and go, man, UCLA was not a 4-year decision for me. It was a 40-year decision for me. And what kinds of things are we able to equip them with? And so that really was the defining moment. And I just said, we are going to teach, mentor, and equip for life beyond UCLA, period. We're going to create an uncommon transformational experience for every young woman who comes through our program. And hopefully, maybe we can create some John Valley stories of our own.
Well, you sure have done that, Coach, and you're well on your way to creating so many more. In thinking about, again, preparing people, for success on the basketball court and off it, I've also heard you talk about this idea, whether it comes down to how you're planning practices or how you're just leading in general. You're constantly looking to kind of strike this right balance between struggle and joy. That's something that I've heard you say in the past that's interesting to me, because it's something that I think about often, right? Trying to find that right level for all of us where we're feeling challenged, but we're not feeling overwhelmed. And I'm curious, you've had a lot of experience doing this at a number of different places, and obviously a long time now at UCLA as a head coach. How do you find that balance?
A couple of things. I think you have to have truth tellers in your life, because I don't think any of us can see it clearly always on our own. I know I have a lot of blind spots, and I don't care if you're leading your family or you're leading your business or a classroom or a team. In my case, I have to ask a lot. Like Shannon LaBeouf, who's my associate head coach, is someone I really lean on for that. Like, what are you seeing? What's your pulse there? Are we finding the right healthy tension between that struggle and joy? And so I think number one, you got to be willing to ask, how we doing here? What am I missing here? And then I think, it's systems. The Navy SEALs always talk about, you don't sink to the level of your talent, you sink to the level of your training and your systems. And so how are our systems reinforcing both of those things? So in my practice plan, I write it at the top every single day, struggle and joy. That's my biggest responsibility in that day, is to try to strike that balance. And, sometimes I have to reevaluate and go a little harder the next day. And sometimes I need to maybe be a little silly at points. But I don't think joy, is a word that people get misconstrued a lot. It's not like funsy onesie, like we're going to sit around and play chess or something, and not that those are bad things, but it's joy is like a sense. I think it really stems from gratitude. This is an I get to experience, not an I have to experience. This is like, no one's forcing you to be here. You made this commitment because you chose it. But I do think there's appropriate times. We always start out our summer practices with a joke. One of the players has to come with a joke, and we start it out, and then somebody is responsible for the thought of the day on the team. I think that's another way you do it, is you give as much ownership to your players as you possibly can. I'll go back to them a lot and go, hey, isn't that what you said you wanted? I stopped to the practice yesterday and said, look, you guys said you wanted to be held to the highest of standards. And so right now, when you're meeting your edge, and your edge is where your talent runs out and you are forced to develop the discipline and skill that is needed to reach your potential. And I'm like, you guys are at your edge right now, and some of you are not embracing it. Some of you are just surviving the reps. Some of you have stopped giving to your teammates. And I'm like, you said you wanted to be held to this. Is that words or is that action? And so we got to embrace our edge, guys, because this is where the good stuff happens. You got to run right into your tunnel of chaos, right into your struggle, and make it happen. And they really responded to that. But I think you just have to have that healthy tension. And then I'll go to the players after practice and go, okay, scale of 1 to 10, how was our healthy tension today? And they'll go, yeah, you missed the mark, coach, or yeah, today was a good one. We found it today. We found that balance today. So I'm not afraid to ask them what they think. We may not always agree, but I'd always rather know what they think.
In that moment that let's use that as an example, that moment where you essentially reminded them that this is what they signed up for. This is what hey, you guys are all asking me to hold you to an extremely high standard because we want to accomplish this, this, and this. Is that in a way kind of bringing them into the process and making them feel that sense of ownership and accountability? Because I've got to believe that, and I've talked to a lot of coaches about this, and this is a theme that kind of continues to come in the conversations, is that today's generation of players want or in many ways need, want, however you want to call it, desire a different level of ownership and engagement in the process. The days of just because I said so and I'm your head coach seem to be kind of over. And it's what you were doing there, reminding them, hey, look, this is not my request. This is our request.
Yeah. I think that one of the characteristics, and we've done a lot of studying on this generation in terms of how do we connect better and what do we need to understand. It really isn't about, some people say, well, kids these days. Well, I'm not saying it's bad or I'm being condescending because it's my job to adjust. But I do think I need to be knowledgeable about what is the lens they're seeing the same experience through. They are not seeing it through the lens of, I'm just going to do whatever coach says. I mean, that's just not how they see it. And so if I'm going to be effective in them, I have to meet them halfway. I don't need to change the standards, but I do maybe need to change the style. And so I think that's what I've been trying to do in terms of the ownership piece is just keep bringing it back to them. Another thing that they hate it when I say this, but I'll say, hey, have your goals changed? I mean, just let me know. Because when you told me this is what you wanted to go to, and so I'll back off. You just tell me when those goals have changed. Or if you think your roadmap works better. Or the other one I'll say, is, how's your way working? If your way's working for you, go ahead. But if it's not, why don't we try my way? And let's go from there. But I really don't think me telling them, I need to get them in environments where they're forced to choose for themselves. And I need to manufacture scenarios of uncomfortability where they've got to fight for their mind, where they've got to fight to find new gears inside of them that maybe they didn't even know they had. We talk a lot in our program about neutral thinking. When the emotions get high, when fatigue comes in, when adversity hits, how do you get yourself back to neutral? I don't think you can be like positive all the time, but I think you can get back to neutral and refocus yourself so that you can ask yourself, what's my next right step? And they'll be talking about that in games for timeouts and all kinds of different things. But I think the days of just telling them what to do are definitely over. But the great thing about that is it may be quicker to be able to tell someone what to do and make them do it, but it's not equipping for the rest of their lives. And so even though this takes a little more time, more investment from us, I also like to think it has a much deeper and long-lasting impact.
I certainly agree with that, Coach. I think that, again, it's like a lot of things in life. Like the more you put in, the more you get out. The longer tail the ROI is going to be. Speaking of kind of navigating the challenges of a high intensity environment and the UCLA women's basketball program, I had Michaela Onyanwere, one of your former players, on the podcast a couple of years ago. She joined me for a conversation right after she had won the Rookie of the Year in her first WNBA season with the New York Liberty. And there were so many interesting things that she shared in our conversation, specifically about her time at UCLA. But one of the things that she talked about that struck me was she said, I asked her about the transition from college to the WNBA. Obviously, she had a fast start in the WNBA with a Rookie of the Year. But I asked her about those transitions. And she said, Andrew, the transition from high school to college was so much harder than the transition from college to the WNBA. And so much of that had to do with the experience I had at UCLA. She talked about how that whole first year, she said, I really wasn't a very good shooter. I had to work on my shooting. And I'm curious whether it's Michaela's story or I'm sure there's countless others. Like how do you think about preparing them for their transition? And I guess more broadly think, anybody listening, what they're preparing for a transition into anything, like what are the types of things that you would want someone to be doing as they get ready for a big transition like that? Let's start there. And then I want to dig into a little bit more of like what Michaela said.
Well, I think you have to reverse engineer where you want to go, right? So I know most of our players want to play professionally. So what are the trends at the professional level? What's the style of play trajectories? What are the sort of non-negotiable skills that next level demand? And I called every single WNBA coach early in my career and said, what are you seeing? What do you wish players came to you with that they're not? If you were in our situation, what would you be focused on? Then I just tried to reverse engineer a very intentional plan that is going to add to their toolbox for such a time as she talked about, right? Michaela is such a great example because she just so methodically allowed us to push her to next level things. She was such a great finisher her freshman year. She just had but she was an elite teammate. She had great work ethic. And those are things I didn't give her. She brought those. Her mom and dad gave her those. She came to us. I actually a really funny side note story about a compliment to her. And I never really believed it, but now I do. Her AAU coach told me a story and said, Michaela Onyenwere is maybe one of the only people that I've ever coached that could set my house on fire and it burned to the ground. And she come over and say, sorry, coach. And I'm like, it's okay. No problem. It is sort of just how you feel about her because she is such an amazing human being to be around. And she has such a work ethic, a drive, but she's so other-centered and team-oriented that she makes everything I do look easy because she's such a phenomenal person and player. That is something we really recruit to, quite frankly, is that we say, look, we have a parallel path system. We are studying every year, where are our lacks and how do we close the gap of where we are to winning national championship level standards? What are Final Four teams doing that we aren't doing and where do we need to grow? And simultaneously, what are we seeing in the style of play? What are we seeing in the best WNBA teams? What are WNBA coaches telling me they're looking for in their draft picks? Really doing our homework with that for every single class. And then trying to put them in positions to do both. I don't think a lot of coaches say, well, those are mutually exclusive. No, they're not. You just have to put in a lot of intention and planning in how to marry those two philosophies of we're trying to win championship standards, but we're also trying to win transition standards. And that's sort of what you're referring to.
That's exactly it, Coach. I'm so curious. And another fun fact I learned about Michaela in that conversation, I asked her if she wasn't successful on the basketball court, what would she be doing? She told me she'd be a dentist. And I said, you'd be a fantastic dentist. There is no question about that, because I'm sure whatever you put your mind to, you'll be successful.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes back to those principles that you talk about in building success, not just on the basketball court, but off it and anything in life. I'm curious, like when you identify that a player is struggling with that transition, what types of things are you doing to kind of help them through it? I mean, maybe a piece of it is reminding them of things like that, get to neutral, right? And look for some positive. What are some of the other specific things that you're doing to kind of help them through that period and get on the other side?
Well, it's interesting. The transition to the pros is nothing compared to the freshman transition, right? As Michaela referred to. The freshman transition, I mean, I've got 7 new players right now and 4 freshmen and 3 transfers. I tell them, you're going to want to quit a dozen times before Christmas. I mean, it's just really, really hard. But I was talking to Janiyah Barker the other day, and she goes, well, that's why I came here. I knew I needed this level of discipline. And she goes, I'm not going to lie, it's even been harder than I thought. But I know it's what I need. It may not always be what I want. And there has to be a breaking inside of all of us, I think. We've all been the best, right? You're either the best in high school and then you're going to college, and you sort of got to be broken a little bit to rebuild at a higher level. It's just like when you're going to the gym and you're lifting weights to break your muscles down so that then they can become stronger. It's really no different in that transition. And it's the same when you go to the pros, right? So it's going to require some different things. You're going to need to realize, I remember when Jordan Canada, who's now a starting point guard in the WNBA in Atlanta and 2 WNBA championships, her first year, the summer, she could not get the ball across half court against our scout guys. And she's like, I'm never going to play here. I can't do it. And she ended up being Pac-12 Freshman of the Year and going on to have this great career. And she said to me one time in the middle of her freshman year, she goes, I just had to face the fact that what used to be a ooh-ah assist is now a turnover. And I got to let it tighten everything up. And so she had to be broken a little bit. She had to be humbled a little bit. And I always think first of all, I wouldn't have a job if they didn't need us a little bit. And secondly, you just can't reach your potential because all of us have human nature. We like comfort. We like praise. We like all those things. And until you are sort of stripped of your old ways, you're not willing to really find new ways. I always say the discipline or the pain of where you are has to be greater than the pain it will take to get to where you want to go. And in those transitions, you got to allow that pain to be greater so that you can be spurred on to develop the discipline and go through the pain of what it takes to get to where you want to go. And so I just try to flip it on its head and go, this is going to be tough. You're going to feel this. and it's going to force you to choose. And isn't that cool?
Very well said, Coach. And speaking of where you want to go, I'm not sure if this is where you guys wanted to go, but you guys are headed to the Big Ten. You're opening up play in the Big Ten. And I'm a Penn State alum, so I'm excited to welcome you all to the conference. And I can't wait to see you guys in Big Ten country. It makes it certainly easier geographically for me. But I do know that you personally and so many others played a massive role in growing women's basketball in the Pac-12 into really what it became. And more broadly, I mean, you've played a massive role, as have others, in this massive wave that we're seeing in just women's sports and not just women's basketball. But I'm curious, like, have you had a chance to reflect on that a bit? Like, you're headed to a new conference and everybody's excited. New is exciting, but there's a lot you're leaving behind. And I know you and so many other coaches poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building the Pac-12 into what it ultimately became.
Yeah, you talk about parallel paths. I feel like the last 9 months I've been on this grieving path and excitement path all at the same time. And it's like, it is what it is. The reality was I knew it was changing and I couldn't do anything about that. And the landscape of college sports in general is like nothing we've ever experienced before. And my job as a leader is to be willing to pivot, really anticipate, build infrastructure, and adjust to the new landscape in which I'm in. What I think about it is really inconsequential. But there is a real sense of I want to honor the past. And that's been hard because I'm like, okay, well, here we go. We're going to the Big Ten. What do we need to do? Let's move on. But what I think that really sells short is honoring those people, those athletes, those coaches that did pour so much. Yes, I was a part of that, but I was a small part compared to a lot of other people. And so be able to honor the Tara Vandevers of the world or Natalie Williams of the world and the Trailblazers, the Gumake sisters. I mean, the list goes on in the Pac-12 of people that have just invested so much. So I was really it's another healthy tension, right? You talked about struggle and joy. This was my healthy tension this last 9 months was say thank you a lot and honor the past and honor the past people and prepare relentlessly about our next challenge ahead of us. And I am really thankful. I mean, the reality is I think we are headed to a 2 power league system here in the next 3 to 5 years. And we're Power 4 right now. And the Big Ten and the SEC are just so dramatically resourced differently than everybody else that I'm really thankful to be a part of it. As someone who wants to compete at the highest levels, I'm really thankful that that's where we landed. I'm very thankful for the leadership of our chancellor and our athletic director, Martin Jarmond, in leading us into this new landscape, because the reality is I think it's going to be really hard to win national championships in 5 years if you're not in those 2 conferences. And so I'm grateful. And so, yeah, we've had to change how we schedule in terms of knowing what the travel is going to be like. And so, but that's not been hard. We're learning, we're watching a lot more film, trying to get more familiar. I definitely watched with different eyes Big Ten teams last year. So we're really excited. Now, I would say they've got a bigger deal because both us and USC are top 5 in the country and going to have an amazing, and then they're going to be traveling across the country to play us. So they're going to have their own challenges, the rest of the Big Ten. But, I just think you can't complain about where we are now. You got to make it work to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. 100%, Coach. I'm curious. We talked a few minutes ago. Michaela said that if she wasn't playing basketball, she'd probably be a dentist. Have you ever thought about what you would be doing if you weren't doing all this?
I have about 3 different things that I might do. I'll tell you one thing that I had growing up that I always thought, that was so nice. I had a lawn mowing business when I was growing up in middle school, and I am like meticulous about my lawn. And I thought to myself, you know what, forget all this. I'm just going to go mow lawns for a living. This is it'll be a lot less stressful. And don't put it past me. Jeff Walls at the University of Louisville, he and I talk about it all the time. We both had lawn mowing businesses and we're like, what are we doing? When we retire, we're just going to go mow lawns and have a very stress-free kind of life. But probably more realistically, I never thought I would do this, but going through the Kaplan report and the gender equity crisis, as well as some of the other things and the challenges of administration, I think one of my strengths is sort of strategic planning and vision casting. And so I might want to go into athletic administration, depending on how this NIL world evolves a little bit. I'm interested in that and helping to provide for coaches what I always want for myself as an administrator? What do I desire? And maybe I could provide that for somebody else. Or the other thing is my faith is my relationship with Jesus is really important to me. So I've thought about just volunteering with like a Fellowship of Christian Athletes or I don't know what organization, or just trying to say, hey, God, how do you want to use me? How do you want me to love people well? Even ones that disagree with me or have different thoughts. I just want to love people well. And so if I could be used in that way, I'm trying to keep my mind open. But I am getting to an age where I'm starting to ask God consistently, okay, God, what do you have for me next? When this coaching gig is up, which could be sooner rather than later, you never know, but it's a crazy world out there. But what do you have for me next? And I probably have asked that question more in the last year than I have ever before.
Well, Coach, there is no question, whether it's at UCLA as the head women's basketball coach or in any of the other disciplines that you just mentioned there is no question that you will continue to impact so many lives in such a profound way. I'm just struck by how much thought you put into everything that you do, and everything has a purpose and everything has intention, and that is just incredibly impressive. And it's no wonder, based on the conversation I had with Michaela, I'm not surprised that she navigated UCLA so well and went on to have such a great quick start to her WNBA career. But again, like we've talked about and alluded to so many times in this conversation, it almost doesn't matter how many banners you hang or how many WNBA draft picks you produce out of the program. It's about the lives you impact and the people that go on to have a ripple effect on others. And in that sense, the Coach Close impact continues to impact. Will it continue to impact people for decades and decades to come?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, Coach Tony Noonan on my staff is golfing with him today. But our director of mental training, my first 7 years at UCLA, was a guy named Joshua Medcalf. And he wrote Chop Wood, Carry Water. He actually just has a new book, just came out. But he one time brought our entire team out into the center of Pauley Pavilion. And he's like, what are the only two things that are going to stay with you for the rest of your life from these 4 years? And I remember Jordan Cannon going, I want that banner, baby. I want to raise that banner. And he goes, I cannot wait to be at your banner raising ceremony, but that will be a byproduct. And it will be a byproduct of choices and process and banners hanging gyms. And then someone else said, oh, I want that ring. Give me that ring, baby. And he's like, man, I love a little bling, he said. And I hope that all happens. And I hope that the way we practice and prepare and care for each other this year leads us to getting that ring. But it will also be a byproduct of behaviors and choices that you make day in and day out, and rings collect dust and sit in trophy cases. He said, the only two things that stay with you for the rest of your life from these 4 years is who you become and who you impact. And it's not about me. I mean, there's a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. And what the first line in the book is, it's not about you. So I think you have to first acknowledge that UCLA women's basketball is not about me. It is about helping young women become who they want to become and impact the people they want to impact in the manner in which they want to impact. And so am I going to be the biggest smiling coach when they're cutting down nets and hanging banners? Absolutely. But I'm going to be doing that because I know who they became in the process, who they impacted in the process, and that will never leave them.
Coach, there is no question that you are a certified tarp puller, as I like to say every single week here on Everybody Pulls the Tarp. You live the Everybody Pulls the Tarp mindset, and everything you do, always leading by example, lifting others up, and having an impact on so many in such profound ways. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. This is a conversation that I've wanted to have for so long, in particular since I talked to Michaela. I said, I got to know more about that program. I can't wait to talk to Coach Close. Thank you so much.
It is my honor to be with you. Thank you for what you're doing to talk about leadership and honor people. It means a lot.
Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.